Good afternoon. My name is Aneesh Chopra and I'm excited to be with you today at GovDefenders. Excited to have a chance to not only share a bit on the topic at hand, but to engage with you on your questions shortly after my remarks. I'm here to share with you an idea that the country is on the verge of solving its biggest challenges. But by doing so, we're going to see more collaboration between the public sector and the private sector to go after the biggest issues of healthcare and energy and education. And that we're going to do so in a manner that will build on the trust and the security that the American people believe must come from their government. Today's topic is ensuring that we can realize the promise of open innovation in securing these networks. What I'd like to do is walk you through a bit of history. Not too long ago, we had a tough time. Back in September, the administration was getting ready to launch Healthcare.gov, the signature achievement of the President's Affordable Care Act. And it played to the cynics who feel that government just can't seem to get its act together. The statement at the message that you saw when you visited the screen and you couldn't quite make it through the enrollment process said a lot, not just about the technology, but about the state of our public policy today. The system is down at the moment. That message not only conveyed the problems of the website, but it also conveyed the sense that we can't quite get the right and the left, the community at large, to work together to solve the biggest challenges of our day. Is that true? What have we learned, and what can we do to overcome this perception that government simply can't work? Well, we tried to take a page from the private sector early in the first term of the Obama administration. We drew some lessons from notable corporations like Kodak and others, not for their successes, but for their challenges. When you take a look at what we've seen over the last 50 some odd years, a research study by my old colleagues at the Corporate Executive Board took a look at those organizations that seemed to be the best in their industry, with no end in sight to their glory and success. Yet somehow, over the course of a relatively short period of time, these organizations had suffered from a stall. They had been achieving year-over-year growth, but what seemed to be an overnight occurrence was a reversal of that fortune. Organizations that no longer could see economic growth, but rather a dwindling and eventually almost an unrecoverable fail. That's the story of Kodak, an organization that was in its heyday just 2 or 3 decades ago, 90+% market share in its field, thinking that it could do no wrong. And yet here we were in 2012. First Lady invited to the State of the Union box Mike Krieger, the co-founder of Instagram. In a bit of irony, in the same period of time that Instagram is acquired for $1 billion from Facebook, Kodak is declaring bankruptcy. What went wrong and what happened, and what lessons might we draw from this that would allow us to move forward, not just in the private sector, but in the public sector and the increasingly important collaboration between the two? Well, Kodak failed to innovate. That was among its chief failures. The same entity that had invented the VCR, but chose not to commercialize it because they felt that the American people wouldn't pay $500 for it. The same organization that invented digital photography, but failed to make critical investments to secure its growth for fear that it would have a detrimental effect on its core business. This is the organization that made management decisions that allowed it to essentially dwindle and to lead to that bankruptcy. A case study from Wharton said it best: when new technologies change the world, some companies are caught off guard. Others see change coming and are able to adapt. But others, like Kodak, saw the future and simply couldn't figure out what to do. Our challenges in the agencies is to think about this same concern. Are we innovating at the same time that we're protecting the trust and the reliability and the security on behalf of our work for the American people? This is the centerpiece of our anxiety, and it's one the President tackled head-on in his first year in office when he unveiled a strategy for American innovation, a new model and a blueprint that suggests that the ability to innovate and the ability to secure and strengthen our key assets are actually hand in glove and critical for the success of the other. In the President's strategy for American innovation, he made it very clear that we're at our best as a country when we invest in the building blocks of innovation. That not only means that we have great roadways and railways and runways, but we have great digital infrastructure as well. Secondly, that we shape rules of the road to make sure that we can harness the full value and the creativity of the American people to solve new problems, create new industries. Part of that is to make it easier for entrepreneurs to raise capital, to be more successful and innovative in their corporate lives, but it's also to ensure that we have the right cybersecurity framework that will unlock growth potential, not only in the private sector, but to aid in our mission in the public. Last but certainly not least, we adopt the key principles of open innovation that allow us to bring everyone around the table to solve the biggest challenges of our day. And that the techniques we can deploy from our federal agency perch would allow us to open up data and encourage the private sector and nonprofit communities to put the data to use, to work together in a convening fashion to bring barriers to entry down and improve the quality of key sectors of the economy through standards, working to make sure that we tap into citizen expertise in areas that may not be in their core area by focusing on prizes and challenges and competition, and last but certainly not least, that we do our best to adopt the principles of startup culture, if you will, on well-defined problems that bring the best from inside government and the best from outside government to unlock key problems. How has this come to work in the context of privacy and security? Well, the President outlined a set of key initiatives, but I'd like to highlight the problem in brief to get started. DARPA has said it best. We suffer from threat divergence. If you take a look at the amount of code necessary to attack our systems, it can get by with literally just 100 or 200 lines of code. To defend against all the possible sources of attack, these ever-increasing moats to defend the network are growing and growing in size, millions of lines of code to handle all the incoming threats. And since it's so easy to create new threats, we can almost find ourselves on that hamster wheel struggling to keep up. At the same time, we understand that the information that we hold is sacred, and that as we try to exchange that information across agencies and across public and private sectors, there seems to be a central principle missing: the role of the individual and their rights to that digital information. So the President unveiled an Internet Privacy Bill of Rights, not yet codified into law, but the statement is clear. We need to move away from the idea that we're going to be informed or to consent to the uses of our data in some obscure way that happens on the internet without us really knowing, susceptible to these attacks and unbeknownst to us about where our information resides, to a new environment where we have individual control. Tell me that you have my data and what you intend to do with it, and I'll let you know if I'm cool with that or I'm not. Very simple principles, and one that we're already seeing deployed in the healthcare context as part of the President's work on the Meaningful Use Program in Health IT. My colleague, the CIO in the first term, Vivek Kundra, outlined a pretty clear strategy on how the agencies should adopt a posture of cybersecurity. And it was really a shift, if you will, from a mentality of compliance to one much more focused on real-time security and, frankly, outcomes. This also means that we do a better job of identity management in the digital context, and that we do a better job of sharing information so that we can collaborate in mitigating these risks between the public and private sectors. Obviously, the internal operations and the work we were doing on innovation aren't enough. Clearly, there needs to be an additional step, and you've seen the President propose a legislative framework back in 2011. While that yet is not law, a lot of the principles of that framework are now moving forward through the President's executive order, and you can start to see the benefits of collaboration, especially in the area of establishing voluntary industry standards to make sure that the critical infrastructure of our country is meeting the highest level of cybersecurity protection. This is just the beginning of an effort. We do think that more will be done, not just in ensuring that critical infrastructure meets standards, but that we tap into the entrepreneurs of our country to solve cybersecurity through innovation. And that would include thinking differently about whether this perimeter defense model is enough, or whether we have to move to new models where we in fact neutralize the attacks once they've already penetrated our networks, as opposed to protecting us from their entering in the first place, thinking differently about an internet within the internet, and finally new business models around how we establish cybersecurity insurance markets that would allow us to put the capital necessary to strengthen and improve our networks. But let's keep our eyes on the prize. The whole point of this is to make sure that we are unlocking the innovative potential of data and technology to solve problems. McKinsey recently ran a study that estimates between $3 to $5 trillion of economic value available for the taking, not just in the public sector, but private sector, in thinking through how we open up data in key regulated industries: healthcare, education, transportation, the environment, and many more. This is the opportunity that's in front of us. And with your role in our agencies, I believe you can be a critical player on the field of innovation by contributing. Let me just give you one small example. President Hoover previously served as Secretary of Commerce. And in that capacity, he laid forward a vision of an associative state, a model where industry players might collaborate with agencies to unclog bottlenecks and to make sure that we can overcome shared technological challenges. Challenges like cybersecurity in today's economy. But in that era, it was a problem of designing airfoils or engine cowlings to make sure that the nascent airline sector of the American economy was prepared to succeed. What you saw in that early era under Secretary Hoover's leadership was the coming together of competitors. You saw the Boeing 247 and the DC-3. Both share technical standards and technical designs with what was the predecessor to NASA on engine design, engine cowlings, and on airfoils. And this model has now been replicated in the digital era. We have collaborated between public and private sectors to open up data in regulated sectors of the economy like energy, education, and healthcare. I'll just share with you the story of the green button. What you found in the green button was an idea that separated this perception of security at risk of somehow attacking the benefits of openness. In the utility industry, as critical infrastructure, it is absolutely important that we shield energy consumption data from prying eyes. If people hacked into our smart meters, they might know when we're home, when we're not, and they might have a better sense for our patterns based on the energy consumption data. So the utilities, in moving to a digital era and adopting smart meter technology and preparing to be sort of more efficient, if you will, in the running of our electrical grid, have been concerned about the fear that these new digital assets come with some cybersecurity threat. So it had been very difficult for entrepreneurs and innovators to have access to energy usage data for potentially great things, like reminding me when my thermostat's on and I'm not home and I should adjust my dial, or signaling to me that the utility is now going through a pretty significant period of peak demand, and that if I voluntarily agreed to lower my thermostat or adjust it in a certain direction, that I had actually helped reduce the need for them to kick into overdrive some of the dirtiest sources of energy. So these good policy objectives were in many ways inhibited by the fear that if the utilities opened up their data, they would invite more cybersecurity risk. So what do? You want to protect your data, but you want to support innovation. We came up with an alternative path. Give the data back to the consumer. And if the consumer takes possession of their data, then they can choose to share it with any one of a growing number of third-party applications that can compete on how they can bring that information to life to improve, maybe saving you some money on your energy bill, or improving your health outcomes, or making sure your kids get a personalized education. This concept of a My Data initiative is pretty impactful, and you see the federal agencies adopt this full force. The Department of Education has all this sensitive data on student loans. Rather than open it up to third parties, they're providing the ability for folks to download their own student loan data, who then can share it with third parties to make their lives a little bit better. This is just in the early days, but it's an example of more security and privacy, and at the same time facilitating innovation. So I want to revisit that notion that government can't work. And I want to go back a couple years to 2010, when we initially launched Healthcare.gov version 1.0. This model celebrates every aspect of what we've talked about, embracing openness, protecting security. When we dispatched the Affordable Care Act, or when the President signed it into law, the first assignment digitally was that in 90 days, HHS had to stand up a website called Healthcare.gov. At the time, it was simply to be a catalog of all public and private insurance plans, to include their pricing data and as much quality information as possible so that consumers could shop even before the new qualified health plans would come to life in 2014. That initial application had a bit of a fascinating story of how it came to life. A young man named Edward Mullen from New Jersey, a designer, watching the political debate, decided on his own accord to design what a health insurance exchange might look like. He called it myhealth.gov, and he tweeted this design to my colleagues at the White House. After it caught their attention, he was immediately routed to HHS, where they interviewed him essentially to join as lead designer on the team that in 90 days had to stand up the site. Ed had no contract negotiations, no procurement specialists on staff. He was an individual passionate about this problem, and he had the chance to join in the solution. Second, we made sure that that particular website had openness in its principles from day one. Every piece of non-sensitive data, that is just the catalog of information on the plans, would be made freely available and open for third parties to use. It was so successful, President Obama became the first sitting president to literally debut and present the findings of that particular site to the American people. And, even more exciting, the success of that site wasn't measured by how many people visited healthcare.gov, but rather how many folks had access to the data. Even to this day, U.S. News and World Report has a health insurance marketplace that's 100% powered by the data from the original healthcare.gov. The open innovation principles are in action. And if you take the steps that we've talked of earlier today, I believe you can provide both the security that your agency demands and the American people demand, as well as the ability to innovate so that we can together solve the biggest challenges of our day. I look forward to taking your questions now, and I thank you for hearing me out. Have a great day.